The agricultural revolution, emerging around 10,000 BCE, stands as one of the most transformative milestones in human history, marking the transition of Homo sapiens from nomadic hunter-gatherers to settled farmers. This pivotal shift, which began in the Fertile Crescent and spread to other regions, fundamentally reshaped human societies, diets, and interactions with the environment. Driven by climatic changes, resource availability, and cultural developments, the dawn of agriculture laid the foundation for population growth, social complexity, and the rise of civilizations. This chapter explores the environmental, social, and cultural catalysts that sparked the agricultural revolution, the archaeological evidence illuminating its origins, and its profound significance for the trajectory of human history. The environmental context. The agricultural revolution coincided with the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 to 10,000 BCE, when global temperatures rose and glacial ice retreated. This climatic shift, known as the Holocene, created warmer, wetter conditions that transformed the landscapes of regions like the Fertile Crescent, a crescent-shaped area spanning modern-day Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Jordan. The region's river valleys, such as those of the Tigris, Euphrates, and Jordan rivers, became fertile grounds for wild grains like wheat and barley, as well as animals like goats and sheep. These environmental changes provided abundant resources that encouraged early Homo sapiens to experiment with cultivation and domestication. The Fertile Crescent's diverse ecosystems, ranging from grasslands to wetlands, offered a rich variety of edible plants and animals, making it an ideal cradle for agriculture. Similar conditions emerged in other regions, such as the Yangtze and Yellow River valleys in China and the Indus Valley in South Asia, where independent agricultural revolutions took root. The interplay of climate and resource availability set the stage for humanity's shift to a settled way of life. The transition from hunter-gatherer to farmer. Before the agricultural revolution, Homo sapiens lived as hunter-gatherers, relying on foraging wild plants and hunting animals for sustenance. This nomadic lifestyle, honed over hundreds of thousands of years, required mobility and adaptability to follow seasonal resources. However, as populations grew and resources became concentrated in certain areas, some groups began to settle semi-permanently in resource-rich regions, such as river valleys or coastal areas. The Nachafian culture, approximately 12,500–9,500 BCE, in the Levant provides early evidence of this transition. Nachafian communities, living in semi-sedentary settlements, harvested wild grains and hunted game, as seen at sites like Ain Laha. Their settlements, with stone structures and storage pits, suggest a shift toward a more stable lifestyle, a precursor to full agriculture. The Natufians' reliance on wild resources, combined with their semi-sedentary habits, likely prompted experimentation with planting seeds and managing animal populations, setting the stage for domestication. The transition to agriculture was gradual, driven by a combination of necessity and opportunity. Climatic fluctuations, such as brief cold snaps like the Younger Dryas, approximately 10,800 to 9,500 BCE, may have reduced wild food availability, pressuring groups to cultivate plants and manage animals to ensure a stable food supply. This experimentation required a deep understanding of seasonal cycles, soil fertility, and animal behavior, reflecting the cognitive sophistication of Homo sapiens, as discussed in earlier chapters on their emergence. Archaeological evidence of early agriculture. Archaeological sites across the Fertile Crescent provide compelling evidence of the agricultural revolution's origins. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, approximately 9,600–7,000 BCE, is one of the most remarkable sites, featuring monumental T-shaped stone pillars decorated with carvings of animals and humans. While not a farming settlement, Göbekli Tepe suggests that early communities gathered for communal or ritualistic activities, possibly linked to agricultural cycles. The labor required to construct these structures indicates a level of social organization supported by surplus resources, likely from early farming. Jericho in the West Bank, approximately 9,000 BCE, is among the earliest known agricultural settlements, with evidence of cultivated wheat and barley, as well as domesticated goats. The site's defensive walls and a massive stone tower suggest that settled life brought new challenges, such as protecting resources from rival groups. The presence of storage pits for grains indicates that Jericho's inhabitants produced surplus food, a hallmark of agricultural societies. Cataluk in Turkey, approximately 7500-5700 BCE, offers a glimpse into a more developed agricultural community. This densely packed settlement, with mud brick houses and communal storage areas, contains evidence of domesticated crops, wheat, barley, and lentils, and animals, cattle, and sheep. Artistic murals and figurines at Cataluk suggest a rich cultural life, likely influenced by the stability provided by agriculture. These sites collectively demonstrate the emergence of settled farming communities and the social changes that accompanied them. Social and cultural catalysts. The shift to agriculture was not solely driven by environmental factors. Social and cultural developments played a crucial role. The Nachifian culture's semi-sedentary settlements suggest that social pressures, such as population growth or competition for resources, encouraged groups to experiment with cultivation. The construction of communal structures, like those at Göbekli Tepe, indicates that cultural or ritualistic practices may have motivated early farming efforts. Some researchers propose that the desire to support large gatherings for rituals or feasts drove the need for surplus food, prompting agriculture. The cognitive abilities of Homo sapiens, including planning and abstract thinking, were critical to this transition. Understanding seasonal cycles, selecting seeds for planting, and managing animal herds required foresight and experimentation, skills honed through millennia of hunter-gatherer life. The development of proto-language, as discussed in Chapter 4 of the Homo sapiens series, likely facilitated the sharing of agricultural knowledge, enabling communities to refine their practices over generations. The significance of the agricultural revolution, the dawn of agriculture, marked a profound shift in human history, with far-reaching implications. By securing a reliable food supply, agriculture enabled population growth, as communities could support larger numbers of people than the hunter-gatherer lifestyle allowed. The surplus food produced in settlements like Jericho and Cataluk supported non-farming roles, such as artisans and leaders, leading to social stratification and the emergence of complex societies. Agriculture also transformed human-environment interactions. By cultivating crops and domesticating animals, Homo sapiens became active shapers of their landscapes, clearing forests and altering ecosystems. This shift, while providing stability, introduced challenges like soil depletion and disease, as discussed in later chapters. The settled lifestyle fostered cultural developments, such as art and ritual, as seen in Cataluk's murals, laying the foundation for the rich cultural traditions of later civilizations. The agricultural revolution also set the stage for humanity's global expansion. The techniques developed in the Fertile Crescent spread to Europe, Africa, and Asia, while independent agricultural revolutions emerged in regions like China and Mesoamerica. This global diffusion, supported by Homo sapiens' adaptability, as discussed in Chapter 6 of the Homo sapiens series, paved the way for the rise of cities, writing systems, and empires. Conclusion: the dawn of the agricultural revolution around 10,000 BCE was a transformative moment that reshaped human history. Driven by climatic changes, resource availability, and social pressures, early Homo sapiens transitioned from hunter-gatherers to farmers, as evidenced by sites like Göbekli Tepe, Jericho, and Cataluk. This shift enabled population growth, social complexity, and cultural development, laying the foundation for modern civilizations. The cognitive and social skills required for agriculture reflect the remarkable adaptability of Homo sapiens. The agricultural revolution, which began around 10,000 BCE, transformed human societies through the domestication of plants, a process that shifted Homo sapiens from foraging wild resources to cultivating crops. This pivotal development, often referred to as the seeds of domestication, enabled early humans to secure a reliable food supply, fostering settled communities and laying the foundation for complex civilizations. Originating in the Fertile Crescent and spreading globally, plant domestication required a deep understanding of nature, reflecting the cognitive and cultural sophistication of Homo sapiens. This chapter explores the techniques, archaeological evidence, and broader implications of plant domestication, highlighting its role in reshaping human history. The genesis of plant domestication. The domestication of plants was a gradual process driven by environmental, social, and cultural factors. Around 12,000 to 10,000 BCE, the end of the last ice age brought warmer, wetter conditions to regions like the Fertile Crescent, where wild grains, such as wheat, triticum monococcum and triticum dicoccum, and barley hordeum vulgar, flourished. These wild species, abundant in river valleys and hillsides, provided a reliable food source for hunter-gatherer groups, who began to settle in resource-rich areas, as discussed in Chapter 1. The transition from foraging to cultivation began when early Homo sapiens noticed that seeds dropped on disturbed soil could grow into new plants. This observation led to deliberate planting, with communities selecting seeds from plants with desirable traits, such as larger grains or non-shattering seed heads. Over generations, this selective process transformed wild species into domesticated crops, fundamentally altering human diets and lifestyles. The cognitive leap required to understand plant growth cycles, soil conditions, and seed selection underscores the intellectual capabilities of Homo sapiens, as explored in earlier chapters on their emergence. Techniques of plant domestication. Plant domestication involved several key techniques, each requiring careful observation and experimentation. Seed selection and planting. Early farmers selected seeds from plants with traits that facilitated harvesting and increased yield. For example, wild wheat had brittle seed heads that shattered upon ripening, dispersing seeds naturally. Early farmers chose plants with non-shattering heads, which retained seeds for easier collection, as seen in domesticated Emo wheat at Jericho approximately 9000 BCE. These seeds were planted in prepared soil, often near water sources, to ensure growth. This selective breeding process, repeated over generations, resulted in crops better suited to human needs. Soil preparation and irrigation. To support cultivation, early humans cleared vegetation and prepared soil using tools like digging sticks or hoes, as evidenced by wear patterns on flint tools at Natchez sites approximately 12,500–9,500 BCE. In regions like the Fertile Crescent, where rainfall was seasonal, early farmers developed rudimentary irrigation systems, channeling water from rivers or springs to fields. Archaeological evidence from Chaga Golan in Iran, approximately 9,800 BCE, shows ditches that may have been used for irrigation, highlighting the technical ingenuity of early farmers. Crop diversification. As agriculture spread, early humans domesticated a variety of crops suited to local environments. In the Fertile Crescent, wheat and barley were complemented by lentils, peas, and chickpeas. In East Asia, sites like Yongshao, approximately 5000 BCE, reveal millet and rice cultivation. In Mesoamerica, Valley approximately 5000 BCE, shows early maize domestication. This diversification ensured dietary resilience, allowing communities to adapt to changing climates and soil conditions. Archaeological evidence of plant domestication. Archaeological sites across the Fertile Crescent and beyond provide compelling evidence of plant domestication. At Jericho, approximately 9000 BCE, one of the earliest agricultural settlements, archaeologists have uncovered carbonized remains of domesticated wheat and barley, distinguished by their non-shattering seed heads. Storage pits at the site indicate that early farmers produced surplus crops, enabling year-round food security. The presence of grinding stones and sickles further suggests that Jericho's inhabitants processed grains systematically, marking a shift from foraging to farming. Kataluk, in Turkey approximately 750–700 BCE, offers a more developed picture of agricultural life. The site contains evidence of domesticated wheat, barley, lentils, and peas, stored in mud brick bins within houses. The abundance of grinding stones and ovens indicates that crop processing was a central activity, supporting a large, settled population. The presence of artistic murals depicting plants suggests that agriculture was not only practical, but also culturally significant. Netiv Hagded in the Jordan Valley, approximately 9500 BCE, provides evidence of early barley cultivation, with carbonized seeds showing domesticated traits. The site's sickle blades, made of flint with gloss from cutting grasses, indicate intensive harvesting. Similarly, Abu Huraira in Syria, approximately 9500 BCE, reveals a transition from wild to domesticated grains. with storage pits and grinding tools, suggesting a shift to settled farming. These sites collectively demonstrate the gradual process of plant domestication, driven by human intervention and environmental adaptation. Cognitive and social implications. The domestication of plants required significant cognitive and social advancements. Understanding plant growth cycles, selecting seeds, and preparing soil demanded foresight, experimentation, and long-term planning skills that reflect Homo sapiens' advanced cognitive abilities. As discussed in Chapter 1 of the Homo sapiens series, the ability to transmit this knowledge across generations, likely through proto-language or demonstration, as explored in Chapter 4 of the Homo sapiens series, enabled communities to refine their agricultural practices. Socially, plant domestication transformed group dynamics. The labor-intensive nature of farming required cooperation, with individuals sharing tasks like planting, harvesting, and processing crops. The presence of storage facilities at Jericho and Cataluk suggests communal management of resources, fostering social cohesion. However, surplus food also introduced social inequalities, as some individuals controlled access to stored crops, laying the groundwork for social stratification, as discussed in later chapters. Comparisons with hunter-gatherer practices. The domestication of plants marked a significant departure from hunter-gatherer practices. While hunter-gatherers, like the Nachafian culture, relied on wild plants and seasonal foraging, early farmers actively manipulated their environment to ensure a stable food supply. The transition to agriculture, as seen at Netiv Hagdad, required a shift from mobility to sedentism, fundamentally altering social structures. Unlike the egalitarian nature of many hunter-gatherer groups, agricultural societies began to develop hierarchies, as evidenced by the defensive walls at Jericho, suggesting resource competition. The broader significance of plant domestication. The domestication of plants was a cornerstone of the agricultural revolution, enabling Homo sapiens to secure a reliable food supply and support larger populations. Surplus crops, as seen at Jericho and Cataluk, allowed communities to sustain non-farming roles, such as artisans and leaders, fostering social complexity. The shift to agriculture also transformed human-environment interactions, as farmers cleared land and altered ecosystems, setting the stage for environmental challenges explored in later chapters. Plant domestication laid the foundation for the global spread of agriculture, as techniques developed in the Fertile Crescent spread to Europe, Africa, and Asia, while independent agricultural revolutions emerged in regions like China and Mesoamerica. These innovations supported the rise of cities, writing systems, and civilizations, as discussed in Chapter 10 of the Homo sapiens series. The seeds of domestication were not just a biological transformation, but a cultural and social revolution that shaped human history. Conclusion. The domestication of plants, beginning around 10,000 BCE, was a transformative milestone in the agricultural revolution, enabling Homo sapiens to transition from foraging to farming. Archaeological evidence from sites like Jericho, Cataluk, and Netiv Hagdad reveals the techniques of seed selection, soil preparation, and crop diversification that secured a stable food supply. These innovations reflect the cognitive and social sophistication of early farmers, fostering settled communities and laying the foundation for complex societies. As we explore subsequent chapters, we will see how plant domestication intertwined with other aspects of the agricultural revolution, shaping the course of human evolution. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, marked a profound shift in human history, driven not only by the domestication of plants but also by the taming of wild animals. This process, which transformed species like goats, sheep, cattle, and pigs into manageable livestock, provided Homo sapiens with a reliable source of food, labor, and materials, fundamentally altering their diets, economies, and social structures. Originating in the Fertile Crescent and spreading to other regions, animal domestication required a deep understanding of animal behavior and selective breeding, reflecting the cognitive and cultural sophistication of early humans. This chapter explores the techniques, archaeological evidence, and broader implications of animal domestication, highlighting its role in reshaping human societies during the agricultural revolution. The genesis of animal domestication. The domestication of animals emerged alongside plant cultivation in the Fertile Crescent, where favorable environmental conditions after the last ice age, approximately 12,000 to 10,000 BCE, supported abundant populations of wild animals, such as goats, sheep, and aurochs, wild cattle. These species, native to the region's grasslands and hills, were ideal candidates for domestication due to their social behaviors and adaptability to human management. Early Homo sapiens, transitioning from hunting to settled life, as discussed in Chapter 1, began to manage these animals, shifting from opportunistic hunting to controlled breeding. The process of animal domestication was gradual, driven by both necessity and opportunity. Climatic changes, such as the Younger Dryas cold snap, approximately 10,800 to 9,500 BCE, may have reduced wild game populations, prompting communities to corral and manage animals to ensure a stable food supply. This transition required keen observation of animal behavior, selective breeding for desirable traits, and the development of management techniques, such as herding and penning, reflecting the cognitive advancements of Homo sapiens. Techniques of animal domestication. Animal domestication involved several key techniques, each requiring careful planning and experimentation. Selective breeding. Early humans selectively bred animals for traits like docility, smaller size, and higher productivity. For example, wild goats Capra aegregras had aggressive behaviors and large horns, but domesticated varieties, as seen at Jericho approximately 9000 BCE, were smaller and more manageable. By choosing animals with favorable traits for breeding, early farmers transformed wild populations into livestock suited to human needs, such as providing meat, milk, or wool. This process, repeated over generations, required an understanding of heredity and long-term planning. Herding and penning to manage animal populations. Early farmers developed herding techniques, guiding animals to grazing areas and protecting them from predators. Archaeological evidence from Ain Ghazal, approximately 8000 BCE, in Jordan shows enclosures that may have been used to pen animals, keeping them close to settlements. These structures allowed communities to control breeding and protect livestock, ensuring a steady supply of resources. Herding also required cooperation, as groups worked together to manage large herds, as seen in the faunal remains at Fertile Crescent sites. Feeding and husbandry. Early farmers supplemented wild grazing with fodder, such as stored grains or plant byproducts, to sustain animals during dry seasons. The presence of storage pits at Cataluk, approximately 7500 BCE, suggests that crops were used to feed both humans and livestock. Husbandry practices, such as protecting young animals or milking, as inferred from ceramic vessels at later Neolithic sites, enhanced the productivity of domesticated animals, providing a range of resources beyond meat, including milk, hides, and labor. Archaeological evidence of animal domestication. Archaeological sites across the Fertile Crescent and beyond provide compelling evidence of animal domestication. At Jericho, approximately 9000 BCE, one of the earliest agricultural settlements, faunal remains include bones of domesticated goats and sheep, distinguished by their smaller size and altered skeletal features compared to wild ancestors. The presence of enclosures and storage facilities suggests that Jericho's inhabitants managed livestock alongside crop cultivation, integrating animals into their economy. Ain Ghazal in Jordan, approximately 8000 BCE, offers further evidence, with large quantities of goat and sheep bones, showing signs of domestication, such as reduced horn size and more compact skeletons. The site's plaster statues, depicting human and animal figures, suggest a cultural significance for domesticated animals, possibly linked to rituals or social status. The presence of pens or enclosures indicates that animals were kept close to settlements, reflecting advanced management practices. Cataluk in Turkey, approximately 750-05700 BCE, reveals a more developed agricultural society, with evidence of domesticated cattle, sheep, and goats. The site's faunal remains show a shift from wild to domesticated species, with cattle bones indicating selective breeding for smaller, more manageable animals. The presence of milk residues in ceramic vessels suggests that dairy production was part of the economy, highlighting the diverse roles of livestock in Neolithic life. Beyond the Fertile Crescent, animal domestication emerged independently in other regions. In East Asia, Yangshao culture sites approximately 5000 BCE show evidence of pig domestication, with smaller, more uniform bones compared to wild boars. In South America, Guaitaro Cave in Peru, approximately 8000 BCE, contains remains of domesticated llamas and alpacas, used for wool and transport. These sites demonstrate the global scope of animal domestication, driven by local environmental conditions and human ingenuity. Cognitive and social implications. Animal domestication required significant cognitive and social advancements. Understanding animal behavior, breeding patterns, and nutritional needs demanded observation, experimentation, and long-term planning skills that reflect Homo sapiens' cognitive sophistication, as discussed in Chapter 1 of the Homo sapiens series. The ability to transmit this knowledge across generations, likely through proto-language or demonstration, as explored in Chapter 4 of the Homo sapiens series, enabled communities to refine their husbandry practices. Socially, animal domestication transformed group dynamics. Managing herds required cooperation, with individuals sharing tasks like herding, penning, and feeding. The presence of enclosures at Ain Ghazal suggests communal efforts to protect livestock, fostering social cohesion. However, the control of valuable animals, such as cattle at Cataluke, may have introduced social inequalities, as some individuals or families accumulated wealth through livestock ownership, laying the groundwork for social stratification, as discussed in later chapters. Comparisons with hunter-gatherer practices. Animal domestication marked a significant departure from hunter-gatherer practices. The broader significance of animal domestication. Animal domestication was a cornerstone of the agricultural revolution, providing Homo sapiens with a reliable source of food, labor, and materials. Livestock supplied meat, milk, hides, and wool, as seen at Cataluke, supporting larger populations and diverse economies. Animals also provided labor, such as plowing fields or transporting goods, enhancing agricultural productivity. These resources enabled the growth of settled communities and the emergence of non-farming roles, such as artisans and leaders, fostering social complexity. The domestication of animals also transformed human-environment interactions, as farmers managed grazing lands and altered ecosystems. This shift, while providing stability, introduced challenges like overgrazing and disease, as explored in later chapters. The techniques developed in the Fertile Crescent spread to Europe, Africa, and Asia, while independent domestication efforts emerged in regions like China and South America, supporting the global spread of agriculture and the rise of civilizations. Conclusion: the domestication of animals, beginning around 10,000 BCE, was a transformative milestone in the agricultural revolution, enabling Homo sapiens to secure a stable supply of food and resources. Archaeological evidence from sites like Jericho, Ain, Ghazal, and Cataluke reveals the techniques of selective breeding, herding, and husbandry that reshaped human societies. These innovations reflect the cognitive and social sophistication of early farmers, fostering settled communities and laying the foundation for complex civilizations. As we explore subsequent chapters, we will see how animal domestication intertwined with other aspects of the agricultural revolution, shaping the course of human history. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, marked a seismic shift in human history, as Homo sapiens transitioned from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to settled farming communities. This transformation, driven by the domestication of plants and animals, as discussed in chapters 2 and 3, enabled early humans to establish permanent settlements, fundamentally altering their social structures, economies, and interactions with the environment. The rise of settled communities in regions like the Fertile Crescent laid the foundation for population growth, social complexity, and the eventual emergence of civilizations. This chapter explores the development of these settlements, the archaeological evidence illuminating their structure and function, and the profound implications of settling the land for the trajectory of human history. The transition to a settled lifestyle was a defining feature of the agricultural revolution, driven by the ability to produce a reliable food supply through agriculture. Prior to 10,000 BCE, Homo sapiens lived as hunter-gatherers, moving seasonally to follow wild game and plant resources. The domestication of crops like wheat and barley, and animals like goats and sheep, as explored in previous chapters, allowed communities to remain in one place, as they no longer needed to roam to secure food. This shift, often termed sedentism, was facilitated by favorable environmental conditions after the last ice age approximately 12,000 to 10,000 BCE, which provided fertile soils and abundant resources in regions like the Fertile Crescent. Sedentism required a significant cultural and psychological shift. Hunter-gatherers valued mobility and flexibility, but settled life demanded investment in land, structures, and community organization. The decision to settle was likely influenced by population pressures, resource abundance, and climatic stability, as well as cultural factors, such as the desire to maintain communal or ritualistic spaces. As seen at Göbekli Tepe, approximately 9,600 to 7,000 BCE, this transition marked a turning point, enabling the development of complex societies and urban centers. Archaeological evidence of early settlements. Archaeological sites across the Fertile Crescent and beyond provide compelling evidence of the rise of settled communities. Jericho in the West Bank, approximately 9000 BCE, is one of the earliest known agricultural settlements, featuring mud brick houses, storage pits for grains, and a massive stone tower. The tower, standing over 8 meters tall, and a surrounding defensive wall suggest that settled life brought new challenges, such as protecting surplus resources from rival groups. The presence of domesticated wheat and barley, alongside goat and sheep bones, indicates that Jericho's inhabitants relied on agriculture to sustain a permanent community. Cataluk, in Turkey approximately 7500–5700 BCE, represents a more developed example of a Neolithic settlement. This densely packed village, with mud brick houses accessed via rooftops, housed thousands of people, supported by domesticated crops, wheat, barley, lentils, and animals, cattle, sheep. Storage bins and ovens within houses suggest that families managed their own food supplies, while communal areas with artistic murals indicate shared cultural practices. The absence of streets and the interconnected house design highlight the tight-knit nature of this early community. Ingazel, in Jordan approximately 8000 BCE, offers further insights, with evidence of mud brick houses, plaster statues, and enclosures for livestock. The site's faunal remains, including domesticated goats and sheep, and plant remains, such as barley and lentils, demonstrate a mixed agricultural economy. The plaster statues, depicting human and animal figures, suggest a cultural or ritualistic significance tied to settled life, possibly reflecting beliefs about fertility or community identity. Beyond the Fertile Crescent, early settlements emerged in other regions. In East Asia, Yangshao culture sites in China approximately 5000 BCE show evidence of millet and rice cultivation, with pit houses and storage facilities indicating permanent habitation. In Mesoamerica, valley sites approximately 5000 BCE reveal early maize-based settlements, with structures for living and storage. These sites collectively demonstrate the global spread of sedentism, driven by local agricultural innovations. Social and economic impacts. The shift to settled life transformed social and economic structures. Permanent settlements enabled population growth, as agriculture supported larger communities than the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. For example, Cataluk's estimated population of 5,000 to 7,000 reflects the ability of agriculture to sustain dense communities. Surplus food, stored in pits or bins at Jericho and Cataluk, allowed communities to survive seasonal shortages and support non-farming roles, such as artisans, toolmakers, or ritual specialists. Settled life also introduced social complexity, the need to manage surplus resources and protect settlements, as evidenced by Jericho's walls, led to the emergence of leadership roles and social hierarchies. The presence of elaborate artifacts, like Ain Ghazal's plaster statues, suggests that some individuals or families held higher status, possibly as religious or communal leaders. This stratification marked a departure from the egalitarian structures of many hunter-gatherer groups, as discussed in Chapter 9. Economically settled communities fostered the development of storage and trade. Storage facilities at Jericho and Cataluk indicate that families or communities stockpiled surplus crops, ensuring food security. The presence of non-local materials, such as obsidian at Cataluk, sourced from hundreds of kilometers away, suggests early trade networks. These networks, facilitated by settled life, allowed communities to exchange resources and ideas, laying the groundwork for later economic systems. Cultural and psychological shifts. Settling the land required a profound cultural and psychological shift. The commitment to a specific place, as seen in the construction of permanent structures at Jericho and Cataluk, reflected a new sense of territoriality and attachment to land. This shift likely influenced cultural practices, such as rituals tied to agricultural cycles, as suggested by Göbekli Tepe's monumental pillars. The murals and figurines at Cataluk, depicting animals and humans, indicate that settled life fostered artistic expression, possibly linked to beliefs about fertility or community cohesion. The psychological demands of sadentism were significant. Unlike hunter-gatherers who moved freely to follow resources, settled farmers had to plan for long-term sustainability, managing crops, livestock, and water resources. This required foresight and cooperation, as seen in the communal storage and defensive structures at early settlements. The development of proto-language, as discussed in Chapter 4 of the Homo sapiens series, likely facilitated the coordination of these activities, enabling communities to share knowledge and organize labor. Comparisons with hunter-gatherer societies. The shift to settled life contrasted sharply with the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Hunter-gatherers like the Nachafian culture, approximately 12,500–9,500 BCE, lived in semi-sedentary settlements but remained mobile to exploit seasonal resources. In contrast, agricultural settlements like Jericho and Cataluk were permanent, with fixed structures and reliance on cultivated crops and livestock. This stability allowed for population growth and cultural development, but introduced challenges like resource competition and disease, as explored in later chapters. The broader significance of settling the land. Settling the land was a cornerstone of the agricultural revolution, enabling Homo sapiens to build stable communities and develop complex societies. The surplus food produced in settlements supported population growth and non-farming roles, fostering social stratification and trade networks. The cultural and psychological shifts associated with sadentism laid the foundation for artistic expression, ritual practices, and territoriality, which shaped the development of civilizations. The establishment of settled communities in the Fertile Crescent set a precedent for the global spread of agriculture. As techniques diffused to Europe, Africa, and Asia, and independent agricultural revolutions emerged in regions like China and Mesoamerica. These settlements, as discussed in Chapter 10 of the Homo sapiens series, were the precursors to cities, states, and empires, fundamentally shaping human history. Conclusion. The rise of settled communities during the agricultural revolution around 10,000 BCE transformed Homo sapiens from nomads to farmers, as evidenced by sites like Jericho, Cataluk, and Angazol. These settlements enabled population growth, social complexity, and cultural development, laying the foundation for modern civilizations. The shift to sadentism required cognitive, social, and economic innovations, reflecting the adaptability of Homo sapiens. As we explore subsequent chapters, we will see how settling the land intertwined with other aspects of the agricultural revolution, shaping the course of human evolution. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, transformed human societies through the domestication of plants and animals. As discussed in Chapters 2 and 3, central to this transformation was the development of specialized tools that enhanced farming efficiency, enabling Homo sapiens to cultivate crops, manage livestock, and sustain settled communities. These tools, ranging from flint sickles to grinding stones and early plows, marked a technological leap that supported the shift from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to agriculture. This chapter explores the types, techniques, and archaeological evidence of these tools, as well as their broader implications for the social, economic, and environmental advancements of early farming societies. The role of tools in agriculture. The transition to agriculture required Homo sapiens to develop tools tailored to the demands of planting, harvesting, and processing crops, as well as managing livestock. Unlike the generalized tools of hunter-gatherers, such as spears and scrapers, agricultural tools were specialized for tasks like cutting plants, preparing soil, and grinding grains. These innovations built on earlier technological advancements, such as the fire-based toolmaking techniques discussed in Chapter 6 of the Fire Revolution series, but were adapted to the specific needs of farming. The development of agricultural tools required a deep understanding of materials, environmental conditions, and crop cycles. Early farmers experimented with stone, wood, and bone to create implements that maximized efficiency, reflecting the cognitive sophistication of Homo sapiens. These tools not only increased productivity, but also supported the growth of settled communities, as discussed in Chapter 4, by enabling surplus food production and fostering social complexity. Types of agricultural tools. Several key tools emerged during the agricultural revolution, each designed for specific farming tasks. Sickles, typically made of flint or obsidian blades hafted onto wooden or bone handles, were used to harvest grains like wheat and barley. The blades, often polished to create a sharp edge, were designed to cut plant stems efficiently. Grinding stones, including mortar and pestles, were used to process grains into flour or meal. These tools, made from durable materials like basalt or sandstone, allowed early farmers to transform hard grains into digestible food. At Cataluke, approximately 7500–5700 BCE, grinding stones and ovens are found within houses, indicating that grain processing was a central household activity. The labor-intensive nature of grinding also suggests the emergence of specialized roles within communities. Hoes and digging sticks, often made of wood or bone with stone tips, were used to prepare soil for planting. These tools allowed farmers to break up soil, remove weeds, and create furrows for seeds. Where patterns on bone and stone implements at Jericho, approximately 9000 BCE, suggest their use in soil preparation, while rudimentary irrigation ditches at Chagagolan, approximately 9800 BCE, indicate that such tools were used in conjunction with water management systems. Early plows. While true plows emerged later in the Neolithic, early farmers likely used simple ard-like tools, wooden implements, dragged through the soil to create furrows. These proto-plows, inferred from soil disturbances at sites like Ain Ghazal, approximately 8000 BCE, facilitated planting in larger fields, increasing agricultural productivity. The use of domesticated animals, such as oxen, for traction likely began later, as discussed in Chapter 3, but early plows marked a significant step in mechanizing agriculture. Archaeological evidence of agricultural tools. Archaeological sites across the Fertile Crescent and beyond provide rich evidence of the tools that powered the agricultural revolution. At Netiv Hagdad in the Jordan Valley, approximately 9500 BCE, flint sickles with polished edges and grinding stones indicate intensive grain harvesting and processing. The site's storage pits, filled with domesticated barley, suggest that these tools supported surplus production, enabling year-round food security. Jericho, approximately 9000 BCE, reveals a range of agricultural tools, including flint sickles, bone-digging sticks, and grinding stones. The site's storage facilities and ovens indicate that tools were used to process crops for both immediate consumption and storage. The presence of a defensive wall and tower suggests that surplus resources, enabled by these tools, needed protection, highlighting the social changes accompanying agriculture. Cataluke, approximately 7500–5700 BCE, offers a more developed picture of tool use, with grinding stones, sickles, and bone tools found in nearly every household. The site's obsidian tools, sourced from distant volcanic regions, indicate trade networks that provided high-quality materials for tool-making. The presence of ovens and storage bins alongside these tools suggests a well-organized system for crop processing, supporting a large, settled population. Beyond the Fertile Crescent, evidence of agricultural tools appears in other regions. In East Asia, Yangshao culture sites approximately 5000 BCE contain grinding stones and sickles for millet and rice processing, while in Mesoamerica, valley sites approximately 5000 BCE yield grinding stones for maize. These tools, adapted to local crops, demonstrate the global spread of agricultural technologies. Cognitive and social implications. The development of agricultural tools required significant cognitive advancements. Designing and crafting sickles, grinding stones, and hoes demanded an understanding of material properties, tool functionality, and crop requirements. For example, the hafting of flint blades onto handles, as seen at Netiv Hagdad, required knowledge of adhesives and mechanical principles, building on fire-based technologies like those at Blombo's Cave Chapter 6, Fire Revolution series. The ability to refine these tools over generations reflects Homo sapiens' capacity for innovation and cultural accumulation, as discussed in Chapter 1 of the Homo sapiens series. Socially, the use of agricultural tools transformed community dynamics. The labor-intensive nature of farming tasks, such as harvesting and grinding, required cooperation, as seen in the communal storage facilities at Catalu. The presence of specialized tools suggests the emergence of roles like toolmakers or farmers, fostering a division of labor. The trade of materials like obsidian, as evidenced at Catalu, indicates social networks that connected communities, facilitating the exchange of resources and ideas, as discussed in Chapter 4. Comparisons with hunter-gatherer tools, agricultural tools, marked a significant departure from the tools of hunter-gatherers, while hunter-gatherers, like the Nachafian culture, used generalized tools like spears and scrapers for hunting and foraging. Agricultural tools were specialized for farming tasks. The sickles and grinding stones at Netiv Hagdad contrast with the broader purpose tools of pre-agricultural sites, reflecting a shift toward intensive food production. This specialization enabled greater efficiency but also tied communities to specific lands, unlike the mobility of hunter-gatherers, as discussed in Chapter 9. The broader significance of agricultural tools. The development of agricultural tools was a cornerstone of the agricultural revolution, enabling Homo sapiens to produce and process food on a scale that supported settled communities. Tools like sickles and grinding stones increased crop yields, as seen at Jericho and Catalu, allowing surplus production that sustained larger populations and non-farming roles. This surplus, stored in communal facilities, fostered social complexity and trade networks, laying the foundation for urban societies. The technological innovations of the Neolithic also set the stage for later advancements. The use of plows and irrigation systems, inferred from sites like Ang Ghazal, foreshadowed mechanized agriculture and water management in later civilizations. The global spread of agricultural tools, adapted to local crops like rice and maize, supported the diffusion of farming practices, shaping human history across continents. Conclusion: the tools of the agricultural revolution, emerging around 10,000 BCE, transformed Homo sapiens' ability to cultivate crops and sustain settled communities. Archaeological evidence from sites like Netiv Hagdad, Jericho, and Catalu reveals the specialized tools, sickles, grinding stones, and hoes that powered early agriculture. These innovations reflect the cognitive and social sophistication of Homo sapiens, fostering cooperation, trade, and social complexity. As we explore subsequent chapters, we will see how these tools intertwined with other aspects of the agricultural revolution, shaping the course of human civilization. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, was a transformative epoch that reshaped not only how Homo sapiens produced food, but also how they organized their societies. The shift from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to settled farming communities, as discussed in Chapter 4, led to profound social transformations, including the emergence of new roles, social hierarchies, and increased community complexity. These changes, driven by the domestication of plants and animals, Chapters 2 and 3, and supported by specialized tools, Chapter 5, laid the foundation for the rise of complex civilizations. This chapter explores the social transformations of the agricultural revolution, the archaeological evidence illuminating these changes, and their broader implications for the development of human societies. The social impact of agriculture. The transition to agriculture fundamentally altered the social fabric of Homo sapiens communities. The ability to produce surplus food through crop cultivation and animal domestication enabled larger, more stable populations, as seen in settlements like Jericho and Catalu. This surplus freed some individuals from food production tasks, allowing the emergence of specialized roles, such as artisans, toolmakers, and ritual leaders. The shift to sedentism, as discussed in Chapter 4, also introduced new social dynamics, including resource management, territoriality, and the beginnings of social stratification. Agriculture required cooperation and coordination on an unprecedented scale. Planting, harvesting, and managing livestock demanded collective effort, fostering stronger social bonds and communal organization. However, the accumulation of surplus resources also led to inequalities, as some individuals or families gained control over food stores or land, marking a departure from the egalitarian structures of many hunter-gatherer groups. These social transformations set the stage for the complex societies that would define human history. Archaeological evidence of social transformation. Archaeological sites across the Fertile Crescent provide compelling evidence of the social changes brought by agriculture. Jericho, approximately 9000 BCE, one of the earliest agricultural settlements, features mud brick houses, storage pits, and a massive stone tower, suggesting a structured community. The defensive wall and tower indicate the need to protect surplus resources, hinting at emerging social hierarchies where certain individuals or groups controlled valuable assets. The presence of communal storage facilities suggests collective management of resources, but also the potential for unequal access. Cataluk, in Turkey, approximately 7500–5700 BCE, offers a more developed picture of social complexity. This densely packed settlement, with thousands of inhabitants, contains evidence of specialized roles, such as artisans who crafted obsidian tools and figurines. The presence of elaborate murals and shrines within houses suggests ritual specialists, indicating a division of labor beyond farming. Variations in house size and decoration at Cataluk point to social stratification, with some families possessing more resources or status, possibly due to control over crops or livestock. En-Ghazal, in Jordan, approximately 8000 BCE, further illustrates social transformation. The site's plaster statues, depicting human and animal figures, suggest a cultural or ritualistic role for certain individuals, possibly priests or community leaders. The presence of large storage facilities and livestock enclosures indicates communal resource management, but also the potential for elite control over surplus. The site's expansion over time reflects population growth, a direct result of agricultural productivity, which necessitated more complex social organization. Beyond the Fertile Crescent, similar patterns emerged. In East Asia, Yangshuo culture sites approximately 5000 BCE show evidence of village hierarchies, with larger houses likely belonging to leaders or wealthier families. In Mesoamerica, valley settlements approximately 5000 BCE reveal storage structures and specialized tools, suggesting organized communities with defined roles. These sites collectively demonstrate the global impact of agriculture on social structures. Emergence of social roles and hierarchies. The agricultural revolution introduced new social roles that reflected the demands of farming life. Farmers, responsible for planting and harvesting crops, became central to community survival, as seen in the grain storage pits at Jericho. Herders, managing livestock like goats and cattle, played a complementary role, as evidenced at En-Ghazal. Artisans, crafting tools, pottery, or figurines, emerged as surplus food allowed individuals to focus on non-farming tasks, as seen in the obsidian workshops at Cataluk. Ritual specialists or leaders also appeared, as indicated by the shrines and statues at Cataluk and En-Ghazal. These individuals likely oversaw communal rituals or resource allocation, gaining status within the community. The presence of defensive structures, like Jericho's tower, suggests the emergence of warriors or guardians to protect settlements, reflecting new social challenges brought by social hierarchies began to form as surplus resources created disparities in wealth and power. At Cataluk, differences in house size and decoration suggest that some families had greater access to resources, possibly due to control over fertile land or livestock. The storage facilities at En-Ghazal indicate that surplus food was managed collectively, but control over these resources likely rested with a few, marking the beginnings of social stratification. Social cooperation and conflict. Agriculture fostered greater social cooperation as communities worked together to plant, harvest, and store crops. The communal storage pits at Jericho and Cataluk suggest that groups pooled resources to ensure food security, requiring trust and coordination. The construction of large structures, like Göbekli Tepe's monumental pillars, approximately 9600–7000 BCE, indicates collaborative labor on a grand scale, possibly for ritual or communal purposes. However, settled life also introduced social conflicts. The need to protect surplus resources, as evidenced by Jericho's defensive walls, suggests competition between groups, possibly over land or food stores. The emergence of hierarchies, as seen in the larger houses at Cataluk, likely led to tensions over resource distribution. These conflicts marked a shift from the egalitarian nature of many hunter-gatherer societies, as discussed in Chapter 9, highlighting the complex social dynamics of agricultural life, cognitive and cultural implications. The social transformations of the agricultural revolution required significant cognitive advancements. Managing surplus resources, coordinating communal labor, and resolving conflicts demanded planning, communication, and problem-solving skills that reflect Homo sapiens' cognitive sophistication, as discussed in Chapter 1 of the Homo sapiens series. The development of proto-language, as explored in Chapter 4 of the Homo sapiens series, likely facilitated these activities, enabling communities to organize labor and negotiate social roles. Culturally, the shift to settled life fostered new forms of expression. The murals and figurines at Cataluk and the plaster statues at Ain Ghazal suggest that agriculture influenced cultural practices, possibly tied to fertility or community identity. These artifacts indicate that settled communities developed shared beliefs and rituals, reinforcing social cohesion in the face of new challenges like inequality and conflict. Comparisons with hunter-gatherer societies. The social transformations of the agricultural revolution contrasted sharply with the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. The broader significance of social transformation. The social transformations of the agricultural revolution laid the foundation for complex societies. The emergence of specialized roles and hierarchies, as seen at Cataluk and Ain Ghazal, enabled the development of non-farming professions, such as artisans and leaders, fostering economic and cultural diversity. The cooperative systems developed to manage resources and labor set the stage for the rise of cities and states, as discussed in Chapter 10. The global spread of agriculture, from the Fertile Crescent to regions like East Asia and Mesoamerica, carried these social changes, shaping diverse societies with varying degrees of complexity. However, the introduction of hierarchies and resource competition also brought challenges, such as inequality and conflict, which continue to influence human societies today. Conclusion. The social transformations of the agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, reshaped Homo sapiens societies by introducing specialized roles, hierarchies, and complex community structures. Archaeological evidence from sites like Jericho, Cataluk, and Ain Ghazal reveals the emergence of farmers, artisans, and leaders, supported by surplus resources. These changes reflect the cognitive and cultural sophistication of early farmers, fostering cooperation and conflict in settled communities. As we explore subsequent chapters, we will see how these social transformations intertwined with other aspects of the agricultural revolution, shaping the course of human civilization. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, was not only a technological and social transformation, but also a profound cultural shift that reshaped the beliefs, practices, and identities of Homo sapiens. As communities transitioned from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to settled farming, as discussed in Chapter 4, they developed new cultural practices and rituals tied to the cycles of planting and harvesting. These practices, often centered around fertility, abundance, and community cohesion, were expressed through art, architecture, and ceremonial activities. This chapter explores the cultural and ritualistic impacts of the agricultural revolution, the archaeological evidence illuminating these changes, and their broader implications for the development of human societies and their enduring cultural legacy. The cultural significance of agriculture. The shift to agriculture fundamentally altered Homo sapiens' relationship with their environment, fostering a new sense of connection to the land and its cycles. Unlike hunter-gatherers, who followed seasonal resources, farmers depended on the predictable rhythms of planting and harvesting, leading to cultural practices that celebrated and reinforced these cycles. Rituals and symbols associated with agriculture, such as fertility ceremonies or harvest festivals, emerged to ensure successful crops and livestock, reflecting the growing importance of food security in settled communities. These cultural practices were not merely practical but also deeply symbolic, expressing beliefs about life, renewal, and the human role in the natural world. The stability provided by agriculture, as discussed in Chapters 2 and 3, allowed communities to invest in art, architecture, and rituals, creating a rich cultural tapestry that strengthened group identity and social cohesion. These developments marked a significant departure from the more transient cultural practices of hunter-gatherers, laying the foundation for the complex belief systems of later civilizations. Archaeological evidence of cultural practices. Archaeological sites across the Fertile Crescent and beyond provide compelling evidence of the cultural and ritualistic impacts of agriculture. Göbekli Tepe, in Turkey, approximately 9,600–7,000 BCE, is one of the most remarkable sites, featuring monumental T-shaped stone pillars adorned with carvings of animals, humans, and abstract symbols. These structures, likely used for communal or ritualistic gatherings, suggest that early agricultural communities invested significant labor in creating sacred spaces. The absence of domestic structures at Göbekli Tepe indicates that these gatherings may have been linked to agricultural cycles, possibly to ensure fertility or celebrate harvests, highlighting the cultural importance of agriculture. Cataluk, in Turkey, approximately 7500–5700 BCE, offers a vivid picture of cultural expression in an agricultural community. The site's mud brick houses contain intricate murals depicting animals, hunting scenes, and possible ritualistic imagery, such as vultures circling human figures. These murals, along with clay figurines of animals and female forms, suggest beliefs tied to fertility, agriculture, and the natural world. Shrines within houses, adorned with bullhorns and other symbols, indicate that rituals were integrated into daily life, reinforcing community cohesion in a densely packed settlement. Ain Ghazal in Jordan, approximately 8000 BCE, provides further evidence, with large plaster statues depicting human and animal figures. These statues, some over a meter tall, were likely used in rituals, possibly to honor ancestors or ensure agricultural success. The presence of storage facilities and domesticated animals at Ain Ghazal suggests that rituals were tied to the surplus economy, with ceremonies celebrating abundance or seeking divine favor for crops and livestock. Beyond the Fertile Crescent, cultural practices linked to agriculture emerged in other regions. In East Asia, Yangshuo culture sites approximately 5000 BCE contain painted pottery with geometric and animal motifs, suggesting rituals tied to agricultural cycles. In Mesoamerica, valley sites approximately 5000 BCE yield figurines and ceremonial objects linked to maize cultivation, indicating a cultural focus on crop fertility. These sites collectively demonstrate the global impact of agriculture on cultural and ritualistic practices. Ritualistic practices and symbolism. The agricultural revolution gave rise to rituals that celebrated the cycles of planting, growth, and harvest. These ceremonies, inferred from sites like Göbekli Tepe, likely involved communal gatherings to mark key agricultural events, such as sowing seeds or harvesting crops. The monumental pillars at Göbekli Tepe, carved with animals like snakes and foxes, suggest rituals that invoked the natural world, possibly to ensure fertility or protect against environmental uncertainties. At Cataluk, the murals and figurines point to rituals centered on fertility and abundance. Female figurines, often interpreted as symbols of fertility or mother goddesses, may have been used in ceremonies to ensure successful crops or livestock reproduction. Bullhorns, prominently displayed in shrines, likely symbolized strength and fertility, reflecting the importance of domesticated cattle. As discussed in Chapter 3, these symbols and rituals reinforced community identity, helping to unify diverse groups in large settlements. The plaster statues at Ain Ghazal suggest ancestor worship or rituals tied to community cohesion. Buried beneath house floors, these statues may have represented deceased family members or deities associated with agriculture, linking the living to their ancestors and the land. Such practices indicate a growing spiritual connection to the settled lifestyle, as communities sought to ensure the prosperity of their fields and herds through ritualistic means. Social and cultural implications. The cultural and ritualistic practices of the agricultural revolution had profound social implications. Rituals, such as those inferred at Göbekli Tepe, required communal labor and coordination, fostering cooperation among large groups. The construction of monumental structures and the organization of ceremonies suggest the emergence of ritual specialists or leaders, as discussed in Chapter 6, who played a central role in community life. These roles strengthened social cohesion, but also contributed to social stratification, as some individuals gained status through their ritual authority. The development of art and symbolism, as seen in Cataluque's murals and Angazal's statues, reflects a growing cultural complexity. These artifacts served as visual expressions of shared beliefs, reinforcing group identity in increasingly diverse communities. The use of proto-language, as explored in Chapter 4 of the Homo sapiens series, likely facilitated the communication of these beliefs, enabling communities to share stories, rituals, and agricultural knowledge. Rituals also helped communities navigate the uncertainties of agriculture, such as droughts or crop failures. By invoking supernatural forces or celebrating successful harvests, early farmers mitigated the risks of their new lifestyle, as evidenced by the fertility symbols at Cataluque. These practices laid the foundation for the religious and cultural traditions of later civilizations. From Mesopotamian temples to Mesoamerican maize rituals, comparisons with hunter-gatherer cultures, the cultural practices of agricultural societies contrasted sharply with those of hunter-gatherers. The broader significance of cultural impacts, the cultural and ritualistic impacts of the agricultural revolution were a cornerstone of human development, fostering shared beliefs and practices that unified communities. The rituals and symbols of early agricultural societies, as seen at Göbekli Tepe, Cataluque, and Ain Ghazal, strengthened social cohesion and provided a framework for navigating the challenges of farming. These practices laid the foundation for the religious, artistic, and cultural traditions of later civilizations. From the ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the temples of Mesoamerica, the global spread of agriculture carried these cultural practices to new regions, shaping diverse belief systems and artistic expressions. The rituals developed during the Neolithic, tied to the cycles of nature, continued to influence modern cultural practices, from harvest festivals to fertility rites. The cultural legacy of agriculture, rooted in the ingenuity of Homo sapiens, remains a defining feature of human history. Conclusion: the cultural and ritualistic impacts of the agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, transformed Homo sapiens' beliefs and practices, as evidenced by sites like Göbekli Tepe, Cataluque, and Ain Ghazal. Rituals tied to agricultural cycles and symbolic artifacts like murals and statues reflect the growing complexity of early farming communities. These practices fostered social cohesion, reinforced group identity, and laid the foundation for the cultural traditions of later civilizations. As we explore subsequent chapters, we will see how these cultural impacts intertwined with other aspects of the agricultural revolution, shaping the course of human history. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, marked a transformative shift in human history, enabling Homo sapiens to transition from hunter-gatherers to settled farmers, as discussed in previous chapters. While this revolution brought food security and social complexity, it also had profound environmental consequences, reshaping landscapes, altering ecosystems, and influencing biodiversity. By clearing land, cultivating crops, and domesticating animals, early farmers became active agents in environmental change, setting the stage for humanity's ongoing impact on the natural world. This chapter explores the environmental consequences of the agricultural revolution, the archaeological evidence illuminating these changes, and their broader implications for Homo sapiens and the planet. The environmental impact of agriculture. The shift to agriculture fundamentally altered Homo sapiens' relationship with their environment. Unlike hunter-gatherers who adapted to natural resource availability, farmers actively modified landscapes to support crops and livestock. This transformation involved clearing forests, draining wetlands, and managing water resources. As discussed in chapters 2 and 3, these activities increased food production, but also led to significant ecological changes, including deforestation, soil degradation, and shifts in local biodiversity. The environmental consequences of agriculture were both immediate and long-term. In the short term, clearing land created fertile fields, but disrupted natural habitats. Over time, intensive farming practices led to soil depletion, erosion, and changes in local flora and fauna, challenging the sustainability of early agricultural communities. These impacts, evident in the Fertile Crescent and other regions, highlight the complex interplay between human innovation and environmental change during the agricultural revolution. Archaeological evidence of environmental change. Archaeological sites across the Fertile Crescent and beyond provide compelling evidence of the environmental impacts of early agriculture. At Jericho, approximately 9000 BCE, one of the earliest agricultural settlements, the presence of cultivated wheat and barley fields suggests significant land clearance around the Jordan Valley. Pollen records from the region show a decline in tree species, such as oak and pistachio, indicating deforestation to create arable land. The construction of irrigation ditches, inferred from soil patterns, suggests that farmers altered water flows to support crops, affecting local hydrology. Cataluk in Turkey, approximately 7500-5700 BCE, reveals a more developed picture of environmental manipulation. The site's reliance on domesticated crops and animals, including wheat, barley, and cattle, required extensive land clearance and grazing areas. Sediment cores from the surrounding Konya plain show increased erosion and a shift from forest to grassland vegetation, likely due to farming and grazing activities. The presence of large numbers of cattle bones suggests overgrazing, which may have contributed to soil degradation and changes in local ecosystems. Ain Ghazal in Jordan, approximately 8000 BCE, provides further evidence, with faunal remains indicating heavy reliance on domesticated goats and sheep. Pollen and charcoal records from the site show a reduction in woodland species and an increase in herbaceous plants, suggesting that grazing and land clearance altered the local landscape. The site's expansion over time, coupled with increased sediment runoff, points to environmental stress caused by intensive agriculture. Beyond the Fertile Crescent, similar patterns emerged. In East Asia, Yongsho culture sites approximately 5000 BCE show evidence of rice and millet cultivation, with pollen records indicating deforestation and wetland drainage for paddy fields. In Mesoamerica, valley sites approximately 5000 BCE reveal maize cultivation alongside evidence of forest clearance and soil erosion. These sites collectively demonstrate the global environmental impact of agriculture as Homo sapiens reshaped ecosystems to support farming. Mechanisms of environmental change. The agricultural revolution introduced several practices that altered the environment: deforestation and land clearance to create fields for crops. Early farmers cleared forests and grasslands, often using fire and slosh-and-burn techniques. Charcoal layers at Jericho and Cataluk suggest that fire was used to clear vegetation, as discussed in Chapter 5 of the Fire Revolution series. This deforestation, evident in pollen records showing a decline in tree species, increased arable land but reduced habitat for native flora and fauna, altering local ecosystems. Soil degradation and erosion. Intensive farming led to soil depletion and erosion, as repeated planting exhausted nutrients. At Cataluk, sediment cores indicate increased erosion on the Konya plain, likely due to continuous farming and grazing. The lack of crop rotation or fertilization, practices not yet developed, exacerbated soil degradation, challenging the sustainability of early settlements. Water management to support crops in semi-arid regions. Early farmers developed irrigation systems, such as ditches at Chaga Golan, approximately 9800 BCE. While these systems increased productivity, they altered local water flows, leading to salinization and wetland drainage. Pollen records from the Fertile Crescent show a decline in wetland species, indicating the impact of irrigation on local ecosystems. Biodiversity shifts. The domestication of animals, as discussed in Chapter 3, and grazing practices led to changes in biodiversity. Overgrazing by goats and sheep at Angazul reduced native plant species, favoring grasses suited to grazing animals. The introduction of domesticated crops also displaced wild plants, as seen in the spread of wheat and barley in the Fertile Crescent, altering local ecosystems. Social and ecological implications. The environmental changes brought by agriculture had significant social and ecological implications. Ecologically, deforestation and overgrazing reduced biodiversity, as native species lost habitats to fields and pastures. The decline in woodland species at Jericho and Cataluk suggests that early farmers inadvertently disrupted ecosystems, leading to long-term challenges like soil infertility. These changes forced communities to adapt, either by moving to new lands or intensifying farming practices, as seen in the expansion of Ain Ghazal. Socially, environmental changes influenced community organization. The need to manage land and water resources, as evidenced by irrigation systems at Chagagolan, required cooperation and leadership, fostering social complexity, as discussed in Chapter 6. However, environmental stress, such as soil erosion or water scarcity, may have led to conflicts over resources, as suggested by Jericho's defensive walls. These challenges highlight the dual nature of agriculture as both a source of stability and a catalyst for environmental and social tension. Comparisons with hunter-gatherer practices. The environmental impact of agriculture contrasted sharply with hunter-gatherer practices. The broader significance of environmental consequences. The environmental consequences of the agricultural revolution marked a turning point in human history, establishing Homo sapiens as a dominant force in shaping the natural world. The deforestation, soil degradation, and biodiversity shifts observed in the Fertile Crescent set a precedent for humanity's ongoing environmental impact. From modern agriculture to urbanization, these changes supported population growth and social complexity, but also introduced sustainability challenges that persist today. The global spread of agriculture, from the Fertile Crescent to regions like East Asia and Mesoamerica, carried these environmental impacts, shaping diverse landscapes and ecosystems. The lessons learned from early farming practices, such as the need for sustainable land management, remain relevant in addressing modern environmental challenges. The agricultural revolution's environmental legacy underscores the profound influence of Homo sapiens on the planet. Conclusion: the environmental consequences of the agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, transformed landscapes and ecosystems, as evidenced by sites like Jericho, Cataluke, and Ain Ghazal. Deforestation, soil degradation, and water management reshaped the natural world, supporting agricultural productivity but introducing ecological challenges. These changes reflect the ingenuity and adaptability of Homo sapiens, while also highlighting the complexities of their environmental impact. As we explore subsequent chapters, we will see how these environmental consequences intertwined with other aspects of the agricultural revolution, shaping the course of human civilization. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, marked a profound shift in human history as Homo sapiens transitioned from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to settled farming communities. This transformation, driven by the domestication of plants and animals, chapters 2 and 3, and supported by settled villages and specialized tools, chapters 4 and 5, reshaped social structures, economies, and environments. However, hunter-gatherer societies persisted alongside early agricultural communities, offering a valuable point of comparison. By examining the differences and similarities between these lifestyles, we gain insights into the trade-offs of the agricultural revolution and the factors that contributed to Homo sapiens' dominance. This chapter explores the contrasts in social organization, subsistence strategies, cultural practices, and environmental impacts, drawing on archaeological evidence to illuminate the revolutionary changes brought by agriculture. The hunter-gatherer lifestyle, hunter-gatherer societies, the dominant mode of human existence for over 90% of Homo sapiens history, relied on foraging wild plants and hunting or scavenging animals. Hunter-gatherer groups were generally small, consisting of 20 to 50 individuals, and organized in egalitarian bands with minimal social hierarchies. Decisions were often made collectively, and resources were shared to ensure group survival. Archaeological evidence from nature-find sites, such as Ain Molahar, shows temporary shelters, stone tools, and wild grain remains, reflecting a flexible, resource-driven way of life. Their cultural practices, including portable art and burial rituals, were tied to mobility and seasonal cycles, contrasting with the permanence of agricultural societies. The agricultural lifestyle, the agricultural revolution, introduced a radically different way of life, as Homo sapiens settled in permanent villages to cultivate crops and manage livestock. Sites like Jericho, approximately 9000 BCE, Cataluke, approximately 75005-700 BCE, and Ain Ghazal, approximately 8000 BCE, demonstrate the establishment of large, stable communities supported by domesticated wheat, barley, goats, and cattle. As discussed in chapters 2 to 4, agriculture enabled surplus food production, leading to population growth, social stratification, and complex cultural practices. Agricultural societies were characterized by sedentism, larger populations up to thousands, as at Cataluke, and specialized roles, such as farmers, artisans, and ritual leaders, as explored in Chapter 6. The surplus economy introduced hierarchies, with some individuals controlling resources like grain stores or livestock, as evidenced by Jericho's defensive walls. Cultural practices, including monumental architecture and fertility rituals, Chapter 7, were tied to the land and agricultural cycles, reflecting a new sense of permanence and territoriality. Comparative analysis. Subsistence strategies. Hunter-gatherers relied on a diverse diet of wild plants, animals, and fish, requiring extensive knowledge of local ecosystems. Natufian sites show evidence of harvesting wild grains and hunting gazelles, with tools like sickles and grinding stones, indicating intensive foraging. In contrast, agricultural societies cultivated domesticated crops and managed livestock, ensuring a more predictable food supply. At Jericho and Cataluke, storage pits filled with wheat and barley and bones of domesticated goats reflect this stability. However, reliance on a few staple crops made agricultural communities susceptible to crop failures or pests, requiring innovations like irrigation, as seen at Chaga Golan, approximately 9800 BCE. Agriculture offered food security, but demanded intensive labor and environmental manipulation, as discussed in Chapter 8. Social organization. Hunter-gatherer societies were typically egalitarian, with shared resources and minimal hierarchy. Nachefian burials, such as those at Ain Molaha, show little differentiation in grave goods, suggesting equality among group members. Decision-making was likely communal, with cooperation ensuring survival in small groups. Agricultural societies, however, developed social hierarchies due to surplus resources. At Cataluke, variations in house size and decorations suggest wealth disparities, while Jericho's defensive walls indicate resource control by elites. The emergence of specialized roles, farmers, artisans, and ritual leaders reflects increased social complexity. As discussed in Chapter 6, this stratification introduced inequalities, a stark contrast to the egalitarian ethos of hunter-gatherers, but also enabled the coordination of large-scale activities like irrigation and construction. Cultural practices. Hunter-gatherer cultural practices were tied to mobility and survival. Nachefian sites contained portable art, such as engraved stone objects, and simple burials, reflecting rituals suited to a nomadic lifestyle. These practices, often focused on hunting or seasonal cycles, were less elaborate due to the need for portability. Agricultural societies developed more complex cultural practices tied to the land and agricultural cycles. Göbekli Tepe's monumental pillars, approximately 9,600 to 7,000 BCE, suggest communal rituals linked to fertility or harvests, while Cataluke's murals and figurines reflect beliefs in fertility and abundance. As discussed in Chapter 7, the permanence of agricultural settlements allowed for elaborate art and architecture, fostering a richer cultural life, but also requiring greater investment of time and resources. Environmental impact. Hunter-gatherers had a minimal environmental footprint, as their foraging and hunting practices adapted to natural cycles. Nachefian sites show no significant landscape alteration, with groups exploiting wild resources without disrupting ecosystems. In contrast, agricultural societies actively reshaped their environments, as discussed in Chapter 8. Deforestation, irrigation, and grazing at Jericho and Cataluke led to soil erosion and biodiversity loss, marking a shift from coexistence with nature to active manipulation. Archaeological evidence of contrasts. Nachefian sites like Ain Molaha and Hayonim Cave, approximately 12,500–9,500 BCE, reveal semi-sedentary hunter-gatherer communities with temporary shelters, wild grain remains, and simple tools. The lack of permanent structures or storage facilities contrasts with Jericho's mud brick houses and grain stores, highlighting the shift to sedentism. Cataluke's dense settlement, with thousands of inhabitants and complex murals, contrasts with the small, mobile Nachefian bands, illustrating the scale and complexity of agricultural societies. Engazal's plaster statues and livestock enclosures reflect a cultural and economic shift absent in hunter-gatherer sites, where portable artifacts dominate. The environmental evidence pollen records showing deforestation at Jericho versus stable ecosystems at Nachifian sites underscores the contrasting ecological impacts of these lifestyles. Implications for Homo sapiens success. The agricultural revolution's shift to sedentism and surplus production gave Homo sapiens a competitive edge over hunter-gatherers. The ability to support larger populations, as seen at Cataluke, enabled greater social complexity and technological innovation, as discussed in Chapter 5. However, agriculture introduced challenges, such as disease from crowded settlements and environmental degradation, which hunter-gatherers largely avoided due to their mobility and smaller group sizes. The cognitive and social advancements of Homo sapiens, as discussed in Chapter 1 of the Homo sapiens series, allowed them to adapt to these challenges, developing irrigation, storage, and social hierarchies to sustain agricultural life. The persistence of hunter-gatherer societies alongside agricultural ones, as seen in regions outside the Fertile Crescent, highlights the diversity of human adaptations during this period. The broader significance, the comparison between agricultural and hunter-gatherer societies, reveals the trade-offs of the agricultural revolution. Agriculture offered stability and cultural richness, but introduced inequalities and environmental challenges. As discussed in Chapter 8, hunter-gatherers maintained flexibility and egalitarianism, but were limited by resource availability. The shift to agriculture, driven by Homo sapiens' adaptability, laid the foundation for civilizations. As explored in Chapter 10, while the legacy of hunter-gatherer practices persists in modern indigenous cultures. Conclusion. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, marked a profound shift from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle to settled farming, as evidenced by sites like Jericho, Cataluke, and Nachifian settlements. The contrasts in subsistence, social organization, cultural practices, and environmental impact highlight the transformative nature of agriculture, fostering complexity but introducing new challenges. These changes reflect Homo sapiens' cognitive and social ingenuity, shaping the course of human history. As we explore subsequent chapters, we will see how these transformations culminated in the enduring legacy of the agricultural revolution. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, stands as one of the most transformative milestones in human history, fundamentally reshaping Homo sapiens' way of life. By domesticating plants and animals, establishing settled communities, and developing specialized tools. As discussed in Chapters 2 to 5, early farmers laid the foundation for population growth, social complexity, and cultural innovation. This revolution not only enabled the rise of civilizations, but also set the stage for modern societies, influencing everything from urban development to global economies. This chapter explores the enduring legacy of the agricultural revolution, drawing on archaeological evidence to highlight its impact on human society, culture, and the environment, while reflecting on the challenges and opportunities it continues to present. The foundation of civilizations, the agricultural revolution, was the cornerstone of human civilization, enabling Homo sapiens to transition from small, nomadic bands to complex, urban societies. The surplus food produced through agriculture, as seen at Jericho approximately 9000 BC, and Cataluke approximately 75005-700 BCE, supported larger populations, freeing some individuals from farming to pursue roles like artisans, traders, and leaders. As discussed in Chapter 6, this division of labor fostered the development of specialized skills, such as tool-making and pottery, which underpinned technological advancements. The stability of agricultural settlements led to the rise of early cities, such as Uruk in Mesopotamia, approximately 4000 BCE, where surplus grain and livestock supported thousands of inhabitants. These urban centers, built on the agricultural foundation, became hubs of trade, governance, and culture, giving rise to the first civilizations, including Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley. The development of writing systems, such as cuneiform in Mesopotamia, approximately 3500 BCE, was a direct outcome of the need to manage agricultural surpluses, record trade, and administer complex societies. These innovations, rooted in the agricultural revolution, shaped the trajectory of human history. Social and economic transformations. the agricultural revolution fundamentally altered social and economic structures. The surplus economy enabled the emergence of social hierarchies, as discussed in Chapter 6, with elites controlling land, crops, and livestock, as evidenced by Jericho's defensive walls and Cataluke's larger houses. This stratification, while fostering complexity, introduced inequalities that persist in modern societies, from feudal systems to contemporary wealth disparities. Economically, agriculture supported the growth of trade networks, as seen in the exchange of obsidian at Cataluke and shells at Ain Ghazel, approximately 8000 BCE. These networks facilitated the spread of agricultural techniques, tools, and ideas, connecting regions across the Fertile Crescent, Europe, and Asia. The economic stability provided by agriculture enabled the development of markets, currency, and taxation in later civilizations, shaping the global economy. The shift to settled life also transformed gender roles and labor dynamics. While hunter-gatherer societies often had flexible roles, agricultural communities, as seen at Cataluke, likely assigned specific tasks, such as plowing or grinding grain, to men or women, influencing social norms. These changes, rooted in the agricultural revolution, continue to shape gender dynamics in modern societies. Cultural and technological advancements. The cultural impacts of agriculture, as explored in Chapter 7, were profound, fostering the development of art, religion, and ritualistic practices tied to the land. The monumental pillars at Göbekli Tepe, approximately 9600 to 7000 BCE, and murals at Cataluke suggest that agriculture inspired beliefs in fertility, abundance, and the sacredness of the land. These cultural practices laid the foundation for organized religions, such as those in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, where agricultural deities like Inanna and Osiris played central roles. Technologically, the agricultural revolution spurred innovations that built on earlier advancements, such as fire-based toolmaking. Chapter 6, Fire Revolution Series. The development of plows, irrigation systems, and storage facilities, as seen at Chugagolon, approximately 9800 BCE, increased agricultural productivity, supporting larger populations. These technologies paved the way for later innovations, such as metallurgy and mechanized farming, which transformed human economies and environments. The global spread of agriculture, from the Fertile Crescent to East Asia, Mesoamerica, and the Andes, carried these cultural and technological advancements. In China, Yangzhou culture approximately 5000 BCE developed painted pottery and rice cultivation, while in Mesoamerica, Valley approximately 5000 BCE saw maize-based rituals and tools. These regional adaptations highlight the universal impact of agriculture on human culture and technology. Environmental legacy. The environmental consequences of agriculture, as discussed in Chapter 8, reshaped ecosystems and set a precedent for humanity's impact on the planet. Deforestation, soil erosion, and biodiversity loss, evident in pollen records from Jericho and Cataluke, were early signs of environmental transformation. These changes supported food production, but introduced challenges like soil depletion and water scarcity, which early farmers mitigated through irrigation and crop rotation. The environmental legacy of agriculture continues to shape modern challenges such as deforestation, climate change, and habitat loss. The intensive farming practices developed in the Neolithic foreshadowed industrial agriculture, which amplifies these impacts through monoculture and chemical use. Understanding the environmental consequences of early agriculture provides insights into sustainable practices needed to address contemporary issues. Challenges and trade-offs. The agricultural revolution brought significant benefits, but also introduced challenges. The shift to sedentism, as discussed in Chapter 4, led to crowded settlements, increasing the risk of diseases like tuberculosis, as seen in skeletal remains from Neolithic sites. The reliance on a few staple crops, such as wheat at Jericho, made communities vulnerable to crop failures. Unlike the diverse diets of hunter-gatherers, as discussed in Chapter 9, social inequalities, rooted in surplus control, created tensions that persist in modern societies. These trade-offs highlight the complexity of the agricultural revolution. While it enabled population growth and cultural richness, it also introduced environmental and social challenges that continue to shape human history. The adaptability of Homo sapiens, as discussed in Chapter 1 of the Homo sapiens series, allowed them to navigate these challenges, developing innovations like irrigation and social organization to sustain agricultural life. The global spread of agriculture. The legacy of the agricultural revolution extends beyond the Fertile Crescent, as farming techniques diffused to Europe, Africa, and Asia, and independent agricultural revolutions emerged in regions like China, Mesoamerica, and the Andes. In Europe, linear pottery culture sites approximately 5500 BCE show the spread of wheat and cattle farming, while in South America, Guataro Cave approximately 8000 BCE reveals bean and llama domestication. These global developments, rooted in the Neolithic innovations of Homo sapiens, created diverse agricultural systems that shaped regional cultures and economies. The global spread of agriculture supported the rise of civilizations worldwide, from the Indus Valley to Mesoamerica. It also facilitated cultural exchange, as trade networks carried crops, animals, and ideas across continents. This interconnectedness, a legacy of the agricultural revolution, laid the groundwork for globalization, influencing modern economies and societies. The modern relevance, the legacy of the agricultural revolution, remains evident in modern societies. The surplus economy enabled urbanization, from ancient cities like Uruk to modern metropolises. The cultural practices developed in Neolithic villages, such as harvest festivals, persist in traditions worldwide. However, the environmental challenges of early agriculture, such as soil degradation, underscore the need for sustainable practices in modern farming. A pressing issue in the context of climate change. The cognitive and social advancements of the agricultural revolution, rooted in Homo sapiens adaptability, continue to shape human innovation, from biotechnology to urban planning. Understanding this legacy provides insights into addressing contemporary challenges, such as food security and environmental sustainability, ensuring that the lessons of the Neolithic guide future progress. Conclusion. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 BCE, left an enduring legacy that shaped human civilization, as evidenced by sites like Jericho, Cataluke, and Ain Ghazal. By enabling surplus production, social complexity, and cultural innovation, agriculture laid the foundation for cities, writing, and global economies. Its environmental and social challenges highlight the trade-offs of this transformation, while its global spread underscores Homo sapiens' adaptability. The legacy of agriculture continues to influence modern societies, offering lessons for sustainability and progress as we navigate the complexities of the 21st century.